Teammates down tonight. Can't win with 5 turnovers. Losing that way regardless, losing in the playoffs is not fun.
There are football players, and then there is Josh Allen, and those are two completely different things. Because what you see on Sundays, the cannon arm, the broken tackles, the impossible throws, that is only the surface. That is only what the cameras catch. What the cameras don't catch is what his teammates talk about when nobody is filming. What they say when they're on a plane ride home after a devastating loss. What they do when they see him sitting alone, head down, convinced that he failed the people around him. That's the Josh Allen his teammates know. And once you hear it, you will never watch him the same way again. Let's set the scene. The Buffalo Bills just lost a playoff game in overtime to the #1 seed in the AFC. They put up 30 points against arguably the best defense in the entire NFL. They fought until the very last second, and after all of that, after everything they gave, Josh Allen walked into that locker room and told anyone who would listen that the loss was on him, that he didn't do enough, that he let his teammates down. Now think about that for a second. The man who carried that franchise all season long, the man who played through injuries that would have ended most players' years, the man who dragged his team to Denver and put 30 points on the board against a defense that had been dismantling everyone all season. That man looked his teammates in the eyes and said it was his fault. And when the reporters went to his teammate Damar Hamlin, Dion as his teammates call him, and told him what Josh had said, something happened that almost nobody expected. Dion stopped mid-sentence. He looked up, and he just started crying. Right there in the middle of the media huddle. He said Josh said that, and then he ended the interview. He couldn't even finish, because the idea that Josh Allen, the heart and soul of that locker room, would sit there and blame himself was too much to handle. Now, here's what that moment tells you. It tells you that the relationship between Josh Allen and his teammates is not a normal professional sports relationship. This isn't a situation where the star player shows up, does his job, goes home, and collects his paycheck. This is something completely different. This is a level of investment, a level of care, a level of genuine human connection that you almost never see at the highest levels of professional sports. And the guys who share that locker room with him will tell you exactly that. They will look you dead in the eye and say there's nobody like him. His teammate, tight end Dawson Knox, said something that really stopped me in my tracks. He said, and I'm paraphrasing here, that Josh Allen is not only the best football player in the world, he's also just an incredible guy who carries himself like he isn't the most valuable player of the NFL. Think about what that means. We live in an era where star athletes are treated like royalty from the moment they show any talent. They get special treatment at every level. They get told they're exceptional from the time they're teenagers, and by the time they reach the top, most of them have started to believe it in a way that puts distance between them and everyone around them. Josh Allen, apparently, is the opposite of that. He hangs out with guys off the field. He treats everybody the same. He doesn't want any special treatment because of who he is. And that's not just a nice thing to say about someone. That is the most difficult thing to actually do when you are at the top of the mountain. When you are the MVP of the NFL, when an entire city is building its identity around you, when every single media outlet in the country has your face on their homepage, to walk back into that locker room and just be a guy, to sit next to your teammates and not act like you're above any of it, that takes a kind of character that is genuinely rare. And the people around Josh Allen notice it every single day. Knox also talked about something that really gets to the heart of why the moment after that loss hit so hard. He said that Josh is the type of leader, the type of guy who, when he makes a mistake in a game and they end up losing, he tries to shoulder all of that weight himself. He takes it all on. And Knox said that's a tribute to who Josh is as a leader. But here's the other side of that. When you have a teammate who cares that deeply, when you have someone who is willing to carry the weight of an entire city on their shoulders, and then still feel like it wasn't enough, you feel a responsibility to protect that person. You feel a responsibility to stand up and say, no, that's not how this works. You don't get to take the blame for this. Because without you, we might not have won a single game this year. That's exactly what Knox tried to do. He went to Josh after the game, gave him a hug, didn't even need to say anything at first. Just being there. Just letting him know that he wasn't alone in that moment. And then later on the plane ride home, Knox told him something that I think is one of the most beautiful things I've heard come out of a professional sports locker room in a long time. He told Josh that he was so excited for him this offseason. Because Josh and his wife Haley are about to have a baby, and Knox, who is already a father himself, told him that once you're holding your baby in your arms, the pain of this game is going to feel a lot less important. That the greatest thing you've ever experienced in your life is coming your way, and that the perspective it gives you changes everything. Think about that. In the middle of one of the most painful moments of the season, after an overtime playoff loss, on a plane full of exhausted, heartbroken men, one teammate reaches over and says, "Hey, I just want you to know that your whole life is about to change for the better." That is not just football camaraderie. That is a genuine human friendship. That is a man who loves his teammate enough to try to pull him out of the darkness by pointing him toward the light that's coming. And it's not just Knox who feels this way. The sentiment across the entire locker room is the same. Knox said it plainly. We'd go to war for that man. And he clarified something important when he said it. He said he's never been the type of guy who would go to war for a coach. He always thought that kind of loyalty felt a little over the top. But for Josh Allen, without hesitation, 1,000%. Because Josh pours into his teammates in a way that makes them feel genuinely seen and genuinely valued. Not as players, as people. And Knox said something else that stuck with me. He said the things you don't see in the media is how vulnerable Josh can be. That he's a grown man, a physically imposing, impossibly talented MVP-level quarterback, and he can still be vulnerable. He can still show the people around him that he's human, that he's not performing toughness, that he's not putting on a mask in that locker room to protect his image. He lets people in. And when you combine that kind of emotional openness with the kind of competitive fire that makes him one of the most electric players in the history of the sport, you get something that his teammates describe as almost impossible to explain to someone who hasn't experienced it firsthand. Knox put it this way. He said, "It is such a unique experience sharing a field, sharing a locker room, sharing fellowship with that man." He said Josh is so raw, so real, unapologetically himself, and he cares so much. And Knox said he knows how that sounds. He knows people hear phrases like that in sports all the time and kind of brush them off. But he was asking people to remove the skepticism, remove the salt, because this is the real thing. This man cares about his team as much or more than any person Knox has ever been around, and Knox has been in a lot of locker rooms. He knows what it looks like when that care is genuine and when it isn't. With Josh Allen, it is 100% genuine every single day. So, what does all of this actually mean? What does it tell us about why the Bills are what they are as an organization? I think it tells us that culture starts at the top and not in the way people usually mean when they say that. Usually when you say culture starts at the top in a sports context, people talk about coaches, general managers, ownership, and all of that matters. But the real culture of a locker room is set by the player that everyone looks to, the one whose attitude, whose effort, whose values seep into the walls of the building and become the standard for everyone else. And in Buffalo, that player is Josh Allen. Not because he demands it, not because he declared himself the leader, but because he shows up every single day and gives everything he has, holds himself to an impossible standard, and still makes every single person around him feel like they belong and like they matter. When Damar Hamlin broke down crying in that media huddle, it wasn't just grief over a playoff loss. It was the reaction of a man who has been in that locker room. Who knows what Josh Allen pours into that team every week? And who heard someone say that all of that effort wasn't enough, that Josh let his team down, and simply could not compute that? Because from where Dion sits, from where all of Josh's teammates sit, the idea is so far from reality that it broke something in him. That's how much Josh Allen means to the people around him. There's a version of this story where we just talk about the numbers. The yards, the touchdowns, the MVP award, the playoff record, all of it. And those numbers are extraordinary. But the numbers aren't why Dawson Knox gives him a hug on a plane ride home and tells him his life is about to get better. The numbers aren't why Damar Hamlin can't finish an interview. The numbers aren't why grown men in that locker room say they would go to war for him. The reason is simpler and more powerful than any stat line. It's because Josh Allen is a real person who shows up for the people around him as a real person. He doesn't hide behind the fame. He doesn't use the success as a shield. He walks in there every day as himself, flawed, caring, competitive, vulnerable, fully human, and he gives everything he has. And when you're lucky enough to be in a room with someone like that, you don't forget it. That's the Josh Allen his teammates know. And honestly, that's the Josh Allen the rest of us should know too.